The Hoopheads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
There is so many steps in that process, and it can't be beginning of the season and then forget about it. It's an ongoing deal, and you got to reinforce that with your players day in and day out. If we're building around teamwork, or we're building around being tough defensively or competing, you're just singling out a kid that does that in practice or in a drill, and all of a sudden here's a guy that maybe dives on a loose ball when it really wasn't probably for. All of a sudden you're just giving him, you're over there picking him up, and your teammates or you have your teammates pick him up, and you're high-fiving him, and you're letting him know that, hey, that's the right way to play. Now, if they're not doing that, you just reinforce the fact that, okay, guys, we put our word. What does that mean when we put our words down on this, and are we going to follow this? Because this is a life lesson for you. This is something that is going to carry you farther than basketball, because if you can't stand by your word, are you going to be successful in life? And I would give an example of, when you're a dad, or when have your first real job, and all of a sudden you call in sick because you just don't feel like going to work. How does that apply to what we're learning here? Well, we're asking you to compete every day, or we're asking you to be part of something bigger than yourself.
Basketball to Coach Joe Harris is more than a sport. It has been a way of life for him and his family. Joe spent 31 years coaching varsity basketball in Washington State at 2 different high schools. He taught for 6 years at Bridgeport High School and 25 in his hometown of Lake Chelan, Washington. Coach Harris amassed a 516 and 260 career record as head coach, with 1 state championship and 8 teams who earned a state trophy. In 2011, Joe was inducted into the Washington Interscholastic Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. He has also been involved with the WIBCA for many years, and is currently the president, as well as the director of the Spring Coaches Clinic, held annually in Lake Chelan. Coach Harris has been married for 30 years to his wife Alice, and has 4 children: Kaiti, Joe, Jaicee, and Makenzie. Joe has coached numerous other sports and currently teaches physical education and high school strength and conditioning at Chelan Middle School and High School. Coach Harris's son Joe will be entering his 5th year in the NBA for the Brooklyn Nets this fall, and we'll talk about his experience with that as well during this episode. We believe you'll find tremendous value in the wisdom Joe shares about his time as a head coach and a basketball parent. We hope that you use what he's learned from basketball to grow your own game. Please enjoy this conversation with Coach Joe Harris from Lake Chelan, Washington.
Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And today we have a guest all the way from Washington State, Lake Chelan High School varsity basketball coach, who has been there for a long time, 31 years teaching and coaching. We have Joe Harris Sr. with us today. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
You bet. Appreciate you guys having me on this evening.
We're very excited to get an opportunity to talk to you. Again, we've talked to Coach Greg White from Arkansas, and now we're moving even further west to go out to the state of Washington and talk to you. And we'd like to start out talking about how you got into the game. I know it's been a huge part of both you and your family's life. So how did you get started in the game of basketball? What are some of your earliest memories of the game as a young kid?
You bet. Well, it's been a long road and windy road, but been very enjoyable. I can remember my fondest memories out of my folks' place, shooting on a wood basket up against an old garage that was about ready to fall down in a dirt driveway. So that's how I got started. So needless to say, not a great shooter, but I could track that ball down anywhere it went because of the bounce that popped the ball. But grew up playing basketball here in my hometown of Lake Chelan, and played for a coach that actually gave us a great experience a couple different times when I was a younger player. We ended up going and watching the Sonics, and to date myself a little bit, we got to watch Julius Erving and World B. Free and Daryl Dawkins play against the hometown Sonics. So that's some of my fondest memories of growing up playing the game.
How much do you miss the Sonics?
Oh, a lot. Every time I watch Oklahoma City play and the guys that they've had come through that program, I just shake my head that, sports is avid in Seattle, and it's just missing a chunk, and we're hoping one of these days we get a squad back.
I genuinely think that within the next 5 years they're going to expand, and Seattle's going to get a team back. I don't see any way that they don't, I think it was such a travesty when they left. I mean, I have the memories. Of course, I'm a little younger than you guys, but I have the memories of the Gary Payton, Sean Kemp teams, and always picking them for NBA Jam. And I really hope they come back. I really hope they come back. I really do.
Oh, so do I. From a fan perspective, what a great thing for the state of Washington and the city of Seattle to have another professional team. They've got the Sounders, and they got the Mariners, and they got the Seahawks. But add that fourth piece, what a great way to just kind of round out their seasons.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the things that, we feel fortunate, I know, here in Cleveland with 3 professional sports teams. And I think you kind of take it for granted sometimes when semi-professional.
I was gonna say the Browns. I don't know quite yet, but
the Browns are semi-professional, which I don't know if I can argue with them. But in theory, we have 3 professional sports teams, and I know that sometimes when you travel and you go to a city that doesn't have all 3, we kind of sometimes take it for granted here. And I'm sure that we obviously lost the Browns at one point, and they came back shortly after that. But we can certainly empathize with the city of Seattle and losing the Sonics. I always liked the Sonics jerseys as a kid. I remember really being a fan of downtown Freddie Brown, maybe just because of the nickname more than anything else. But I do remember, I think probably the '79 World Championship that the Sonics won was probably the first one that I really have memories of rooting for a particular team and rooting for the Sonics in that case. So we're on your side, Joe. We hope they come back.
Oh, that's awesome. I can remember listening to those games on the radio. We didn't have television at my home then, and I'd stay up late listening to the radio. My mom would come in and tell me to turn it off, and downtown Freddie Brown, Gus Williams, Spencer Haywood, Sigma, what a great group of guys to follow.
Yeah, I can believe that. So let's jump back to you as a kid. What got you hooked on the game? What was it about? Did you play other sports? What was it about basketball that really kind of attracted you as a sport?
I loved playing sports growing up in a small town. You did a little bit of everything: baseball, basketball, football, just trying to keep yourself out of trouble, I guess, at the most of it. But I fell into basketball when I went to college. I walked on at Eastern Washington University, and at that time they had a JV program. I didn't know any difference. It was just a chance for me to get another way to keep playing, and had some great mentors there at that Eastern Washington University under Jerry Krause, the head coach, who's still a colleague of mine today. But just went from there, and just loved playing the game, and actually started college not thinking that I would get into coaching, but I would just play, and then had a taste of coaching at a baseball youth camp of all things, and just loved being around young people and trying to make a difference with them. And then I ended up coaching middle school volleyball at a small school next to the university, and so I kind of a winding path to get into the basketball coaching arena. But once I got a taste of that at Northwest basketball camps and a couple other places, it just kind of stuck with me, and I've enjoyed every minute of it since then.
Now, we know that you are a teacher as well. Was your original plan when you went to college to become a teacher, or was that kind of a part of the whole learning that you like to coach and you wanted to become a teacher because you thought that maybe would open more avenues for you to coach?
I think like a lot of young people, you head to college, and back in my era growing up, that was the thing to do. You went off to college, or you went to work, and I thought I was going to be an architect, to be honest with you. I loved drafting and drawing and laying out plans and things like that, and then math got a little too heavy for me there, so I took the next step, and one of my buddies through orientation was in health and physical education, and he was playing on the basketball team, and he kind of talked me into going that route, and so I ended up becoming a physical education teacher. A few years later, I ended up getting my master's in administration. I've done a little bit of that, but I didn't really go into phys ed to coach. I just thought it would be a great job. I always loved being active and being part of something that was kind of a little bit on the edge of chaos that sometimes like PE can be on any given day, and it worked out nicely for me. I've 31 years of teaching, 25 here at Lake Chelan and 6 at another school north of here, Bridgeport High School.
So when you went to that baseball camp, and that was the first moment where it kind of clicked in for you, what was it about that experience that made you think, hey, I really want to get into, I could see myself doing more of this? What was it about that baseball camp and that experience you had there?
Well, the baseball camp, of all things, was Stottlemyre Baseball Camp. Mel Stottlemyre was the co-owner of it in Yakima, Washington, and a family friend of ours was running it, and I just got kind of thrown into that. He asked me to come help during the summer, and it turned into a full summer job. And I think I like the fact that when you gave kids something to grab onto and they took it, that it made a kind of a difference in their life at the camp at that moment. So if I was working with the pitchers or batters or fielding or whatever it may be, and you tried to give them a little bit of instruction, I saw the light go off, and it was like, hey, this is kind of cool. I'm making a difference in these 5 to 7 to 9 to 13-year-olds, whatever session we were in, and I like that, and I still love it today. I pop out of work, head to work like it's my first day on the job here after 33 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think one of the things that we've heard, just sort of as a theme from some of the coaches we've talked to at this point, is a lot of them have pointed to that same story that you just told, and that they really didn't necessarily know they wanted to be a coach. They loved participating in all different kinds of sports, but what eventually got them hooked on coaching was the fact that they were able to have an influence on kids and have a positive impact on their lives. And I think that's kind of where, if you're a teacher or a coach, I think that's kind of where we all start and where we all come from at the beginning, is just, hey, I want to be able to have an impact on young people and make a difference in their life. And so it's interesting, again, to hear you say that that was something that happened to you as well, because we've heard it from a number of coaches out there, that just the opportunity to impact kids. And obviously you're doing double duty as both a coach and a teacher, and Jason and I both do the same, are doing the same thing as coaches and teachers. And so you get a chance to interact and impact kids in lots of different ways, both as a coach and then, in the classroom, or in your case and mine right now, in the gym.
Exactly. And I think back to the couple of the first jobs that I ever applied for, typing up a resume, typing, not on the, not processing. And, one of the lines I put at the bottom of my resume is, as teachers really never know where their influence ends. It's a life-lasting impact. And I firmly believe that you just don't know when it's going to end with your student, whether they graduate or they move on. And that's the neat part, is that you have these relationships that you've built with students and or players that you've coached, and they continue to come back and visit with you or what have you.
Can you share like one or two of the stories that have been most memorable for you, in terms of whether it be players or students coming back to you and sharing something that happened in their life, or some influence that you had on them, or something that they remembered that you said that have really remained with you throughout your career?
You bet. Like I said, I've had an opportunity to be at two different high schools in my career, and I think the cool part about each one of those is that different times in my life I was in a different stage of my own development. In my first job, I really grew up with the students around me, but when you a couple of young men that stick out in my mind, first of all, is my first teaching job. Young man came back to me probably 8 or 10 years after he had already graduated from high school. He's looking for his first job, and I get a phone call, and I don't recognize the number, and pick up the phone. It's, Coach, hey, this is Zane, what's going on? And I just say, here, how you doing, man? What are you up to? He goes, well, I'm applying for a job. I need some advice. So when they do that, this is a kid that played ball for me. My daughter had been in his wedding. He'd gone on to get his own master's degree and was applying for an administration job. And I, at the time, was not in administration. I was just teaching PE, and he wanted some advice to me about how to go about that. So when you think of that, you're making a little bit of a difference in his life early on. And when they come back to you 8 to 10 years later, and they're still asking for that same advice that you offered up as a teenager, it gives you a sense of pride where you swell up and just, think, okay, I've done right by this young man.
Right. The fact that he'd come back to you, long after the fact to get your advice, I think that's one of the things that as coaches we appreciate probably more than anybody could even know who's not, in the profession of teaching or the profession of coaching. When those people
probably
come back,
just following up on that, I can think of here one that just happened recently. Former player of ours here at Chelan High School now works in the NBA in the front office of one of the organizations, and he's a very accomplished player, played at the University of Utah, pitched in the minor leagues with the Seattle Mariners, and so he's moved up through the ranks of coaching collegiately and coaching in club and so forth, but now he's in the front office of an NBA team. And I had a chance to see him at this year's Final Four, and he comes up, puts his arm around me, and he goes, "You remember telling me that this game is going to be good to you, it'll take you as far as you want to go?" And he goes, "I've never forgot that." And you start thinking about that, that's over 20 years ago when I had him in high school. And he still remembers the little things where you've taken that extra time to develop those relationships, which I think are just crucial in education and coaching. You just got to jump out of your box and make those connections with those kids. And I can't even reply to that, because that just made me feel so good that here he is at the top of the ladder, so to speak, in his profession with the NBA and being in the front office, and he's thinking of something I said to him in 1998.
Right, which goes back to your point that you made earlier, is you don't really know where that impact that you're having on kids, where it's going to show itself. Is it going to show itself 5 minutes after you talk to the kid, or is it going to show itself 20 years after you talk to the kid? And I think that's one of the most gratifying things that any coach can experience, is having something that you said that you may not have even remembered necessarily saying to a player or a student, and yet having that be so impactful that 20 years later they're still using that to inspire themselves. That's just an incredible feeling.
Exactly. And you say inspire themselves, but what a great way to inspire the people that said that too. And that's how I looked at it. It just gave me a boost, like, hey, I can do this forever.
And so how do you build, when you talk about building relationships, how do you build those relationships as a coach? What do you think are the keys as you're going through and, you get a new team every year and, kids graduate and you're getting new kids into the program? How do you go about building the relationships? Because I think that's one of the things that especially young coaches sometimes, I don't want to say struggle with, but they're trying to figure out, how do I build the kinds of relationships that we're describing here? How do I build those relationships with players?
Well, certainly, and this is I love quotes, big quote guy, and I have been for a number of years. And I picked this quote up from Dean Smith a number of years ago. I'm again dating myself, but it goes like this: caring about one another and building relationships should be the most important goal, no matter what vocation you are in. And that's really stuck with me. I heard that over 25 years ago at a coach's clinic in Las Vegas. And I think just being authentic in that you care about people outside of the gym, and not just if you can score for me or if you can defend like crazy, but how's the family? And, I know you're going through a rough time, and, that kind of leads itself into loyalty a little bit. And I think loyalty to a program and to coaches and to players sometimes is a foreign language these days with people, in that it's so hard to be loyal because you want things right now. And I have a saying with guys that have played for me: you're in until we decide you're out. And that goes for guys that played for me 2 years ago or 32 years ago. And I love that fact that I know the guys that have gone on and moved away and what their families are doing, and it's an authentic investment into their life. It's not just about basketball.
So I want to pull out two things from what you just said. The first one is, what I hear you saying is that in order to build those relationships, it's those extra conversations before, after, during practice, or at school with your teacher, where you're really talking non-basketball issues and really getting to know the kids as individuals rather than just players or students.
Oh, definitely. I think you have to take that extra step to be able to know, because when you call on that player to step up and play outside of their box and give you more than they think they really got, they have to know that you're in it with them.
Yeah, I think without that kind of trust, I think it's very difficult to push players to the edge of their comfort zone. If you don't have that trust and they don't think that you're on their side, I think it's very difficult to maximize what you can get out of them for sure.
Definitely, and that's that's another strong indication of where you're at with your players. Is where's that trust level? Is it just superficial, or again, and I keep using the word authentic, but is it really authentic trust? Do you really care about them more than just a player, and do you communicate that to them? You got to be able to get that to them.
So the other thing that I pulled out from what you said a second ago was when you talked about a little bit about loyalty. And I know one of the things that we're finding, at least to be a challenge here in the Cleveland area, is and we see it at the Division I college level, where players, there's just a transfer. It's like a free agency market, much more than it used to be, and it's at a much younger age, where you have kids playing at multiple high schools. I don't know if you see that the same way, in your area, but we certainly see it here, where a kid goes somewhere as a freshman, suddenly they're not playing, or they're not getting, they're not a varsity starter as a ninth grader, and now they're going somewhere else. And it seems like they're, at least from that standpoint, there's a little bit of, I don't even know if the right word is loyalty there, but just kids are much more in a free agency market, and parents as well, than it feels like they used to be.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. You've seen that now in all over. We've seen it. It's rampant here in Washington in a number of different schools, and I think it's sad, honestly, because I'm one of those guys that I guess you just work it out where you're at, and if you need to hunker down and buckle down and work through the tough times, parents and coaches, club guys, they spend so much time trying to straighten the road for kids instead of just letting them wander through it and go through those struggles. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side, so to speak, but I think it's a sad case, and really kind of emulates our society just a little bit, in that we want to find what's best for us instead of making what's best for us in where we're at.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we tend to, and again, I'm speaking for just the general rule of high school players now. I think they're looking for something that is going to come, I don't know if easy is the right word, but they're certainly not looking to, as you said, accept the challenge. And I've told this story before on the podcast, but growing up in my town where I grew up, I knew kind of the kids that I was going to play with from the time I was in second grade. And there was never a thought in my mind, and I went to a public school, and there was never a thought in my mind that I was going to go to a private school. It just wasn't even on my radar. And today, and I was, the best player in the city, where I grew up, and one of the best players in the area, and there was just never a thought of me going anywhere else. And now, you could be the 700th best player in the area, and those kids are looking to go different places. So I think, to your point, it would be great if people would kind of, as you said, make their opportunity, instead of always looking for that opportunity that may not even be better when you finally get there.
Exactly, and it's it's one of those things where I think we've been our own worst enemy as coaches, because we want our kids to play, and we want them to be exposed to more, and sometimes what that has done is kind of thinned the game out a little bit, in that we've gotten away from really the roots of shooting on that dirt court with a wood basket and playing the game the right way. We've taken shortcuts all the way through it, and I don't know. I think we need to get back to just keeping it simple.
So if we think about youth basketball today and kind of go down that road a little bit, what do you think, compared to, let's say, the era when you and I were growing up. First of all, what in your mind is the most different about the way that a player would grow up in the game today versus how you or I might have grown up in the game? And then how do we start to bring it back to or change the system the way we have now to make it better in your mind?
Sure. Honestly, I think back in our day, labeling us as R, I guess.
Right. We can lump ourselves together. We're close.
We are old.
We're close
Is that
enough.
what you're saying? Yeah, we are old. Okay. We went out and made stuff happen. We found games and we rallied up guys in the neighborhood, or we played in the South 40 football games. And you just don't see young kids doing that so much anymore. It has to be, okay, where's the gym? Where's my trainer? Where's the fancy gear? All this stuff. And again, I think collectively what we've done is we've kind of gotten away from just keeping it simple. And that's where I really like what, our youth, the youth camps that we're running here in Lake Chelan, and that I've really ran all of my career coaching, and then what USA Basketball is really putting forward now is getting back to where there's fun in the game and fundamentals in the game, and teaching kids to love the game without having to have that the carrot out in front of them to get them to come to the gym. But just the fact that you have this pure love of the game, and I just don't, collectively, I just don't see that amongst youth so much anymore. There's got to be a reason why they get into the gym instead of just, hey, let's go to the gym and rack up a few shots on winter stays. And if I can't get on the court for 20 minutes because I lost and I couldn't defend the last two shots, then that's the way it is. And unfortunately, we just don't see that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's something we miss, simply because kids today, they only play with kids their own age. They only play where there's an official. They only play when there's a coach. They only play when mom or dad are sitting in the stands. And there's very few kids nowadays that play, as you described, like on the playground, in somebody's backyard, going across the city to find the best players, or find a little gym that may not be anything spectacular, but that's, for whatever reason, that's where a bunch of good players are playing on a particular day or a particular time. And I think that's something that kids just, like, when I try to say that to a kid, they kind of look at me cross-eyed and can't understand in a lot of cases what I'm even saying. They, what do you mean? Or playing outside.
Right.
I'm sure there's kids that are that have come through that are in high school now that have played almost next to no basketball outside, which, again, I'm sure you did, and I know I did, and I know Jason did, and still does.
I still do. I still play. I try to play every Saturday morning. We play outside, and no one ever uses the court that's in the development near me. And I remember telling my students and my players that I coach that I was playing outside on Saturday morning, and they looked at me like, "What do you mean you were playing outside? That's strange." Like, no, that's how I grew up. That's what we used to do. The guys would come together and we would play outside, and it's no coincidence that three of the guys that I play with outside were guys that I played with outside when I was in middle school and high school. Like, there's still guys that we want to still play together. So, I
love that story. That we have a court in our local park. It's called Don Morris Park, and we have a court down there. And I would tease our guys that have played for me that you're a Don Morris legend. And the older guys that played for me in 93 through the 2000s, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But the last couple of years, I'd say Don Morris legend, and the guys would look at me like they have no idea what I'm talking about. Because, playing outside's a lost gig, really. And, again, that goes back, that's a love of the game, to play outside with the wind, or maybe the courts are wet, or there's maybe in our area, there's a little snow you got to scoop off, or what have you.
So your camps that you run, you talked about bringing them back and making it fun for kids. So what are some of the things that you try to do when you're running your youth camps that make it fun for the kids, that make them want to come back? Because that's one of the things that I know we always try to do with our camps here is, we kind of have the goal of, we want you to learn something about basketball, we want you to have fun, and we want you to have an experience that's going to make you want to come back and play more basketball, and not necessarily come back to another one of our camps, but just pick up a ball and go out on your driveway or go down in your basement and dribble the basketball. And again, just do it for the love of the game. So what are some of the things that you do at your camp to try to instill that and try to give kids that feeling of love for the game?
We've been doing this kind of the same model for a number of years, and then we've just expanded with USA basketball stuff the last several years. But really, it's all the same. It is definitely about that love of the game. And so, all of our camp coaches, we're high-fiving kids every time they come into the gym or off the bus. We break them up by grade level, and each coach is assigned 7 to 8 kids. And again, my instruction to the coaches are, you got to get to know these guys. You need to make a connection with them. You need to pick them up when they're down. You need to make them have an understanding that this is about having fun. So we'll place the younger kids. We'll play a lot of like sharks and minnows and red light and green light. We'll play some dribble tag. We get the music going, and we did a little relay this year at our youth camp where we put on some oversized clothing that Joe wore at Cleveland, and then another set that he wore at Brooklyn, and that size 14 shoe. And we had a couple little second graders trying to put it on and run down the end of the court and make a lay-in, and the whole camp's and we're playing Queen, We Will Rock You. Got to throw in that 80s music. So
there you go.
And just stuff like that, so it's not just about skill and drill and you got to get through this and you got to make so many shots, and I think it's really crucial that they leave there so they want to come back.
I agree 100%. That's one of, I think, the things that I've tried to really focus on with what I do here with Head Start Basketball is to make sure that every kid has that kind of positive experience, so that when they leave, they want to play more basketball. And to me, that's what it's all about. Anytime I've coached my kids, I have a daughter who's in 9th grade, I have a son who's in 7th, and then I have another daughter who's in 3rd, and I've coached them in various different levels of basketball. But every time when I get done with a season with them, one of the things that I try to evaluate myself on is, did all those kids the next season want to come back and play for me again? And I think there's probably no greater compliment as a coach than if the players that were on your team want to come back. And I've seen coaches where they have a team and the next year they got 10 kids on their team, and the next year only 2 of those kids are playing again. And to me, there would be nothing worse as a coach than to have that kind of experience. I want to give them the opposite, where everybody wants to come back and, hey, we want to play for Coach Mike again, as opposed to, man, we can't wait to get away from this guy and go do something else.
Oh, definitely. That's a true testament to you doing it the right way. And, we're the same way here at our youth camp that we've been doing for quite some time. First year we had a little over 350. This last year, about 375. And a lot of those are repeat kids. And so it's unreal when they come in and they watch you and they start to mimic what you're doing, and it's like, okay, we got through to these guys, and they're giving you the high five, or they've got a little sideways shimmy that they want to give you because that's what you did last year to them, or whatever it is. And I think those are again, I just keep hitting on, you got to develop a relationship, whether it's a first grader, a kindergarten kid, or whether it's your high school senior that's played for you for 4 years. You got to get to know those people.
Yeah, and when you do, there's nothing, again, more rewarding as a coach than getting to know a kid, getting to really understand what makes them tick. And obviously in a camp setting with 300 kids, sometimes it's difficult to build a relationship with every kid. But I know one of the things that we emphasize here is getting to know the kids' names. And if nothing else, when the kid walks in the door every morning and you can greet them with their name, there's nothing that makes a kid smile or feel better about themselves than, hey, this coach remembers my name, as opposed to having to say, hey, kid, or hey, you, or hey, guy in the gray shorts. It just makes a big difference when you can greet them by name.
And how cool is that when you get that spark back from them that, hey, man, you just made my day because my name's Justin, or my name's, Henry, or whatever.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's some feeling.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears from sort of the youth model. Let's talk about your time coaching the high school varsity team, and talk a little bit about how you sort of transitioned from a young coach to a more experienced coach, what are some of the things that you learned over the years in your career that maybe you didn't know or didn't do as well when you were a young coach that you learned over the course of your time?
Well, when I first began coaching, I was small school just north of here, Bridgeport High School, and got hired real late into the school year had already started, and just kind of fell into the whole coaching job. I was looking for a teaching job first, and then they had a coaching job opening, so I jumped on it. And I think just like the young kids that you coach, when you're a young coach, you want to try to get to home plate before you can get to first or second, so to speak. And that I made so many mistakes as a young coach because I wasn't patient enough, and I wasn't patient with the players, and I wasn't patient in my own development. And not that I didn't have extreme passion for coaching. I loved the guys. I'm still great friends with a lot of those fellas that played for me back in the late 80s. But it was almost the point where I guess sometimes the louder I coached, the better I was, instead of really thinking through things. And I think again that goes with patience. And then as you get a little bit better with your coaching and your confidence develops, you kind of look at things in a kind of a bigger picture. And I started to look at, as I grew as a coach, I started to look at the season as a whole instead of, hey, we got to get to postseason, or we got to get here, or we got to win these games, or we got to do that. And so instead of taking it as a kind of the luxury or the trying to look for the trophy, I looked at one game. The more as I grew older as a coach, I looked at more as one game at a time, and let's build on this season, and let's build towards the end, and let's break the season down into preseason, the holiday season, regular season, then postseason, and then see where we're at. Kind of a paint by numbers approach, where as I got older, the paint by numbers, it looks horrible at the beginning, but I knew exactly where we want to go. And then when you're done, you have a picture of a sunset that is beautiful. And, if you approach it like that and have that patience to kind of hang in there with the tough times instead of being quick to get out of something or change your offense or change your defense, stick with what your true values or standards really are. And I didn't have that as a young coach. I had the passion. I was fiery. I was always on the officials. Probably I still am. The official guys that are probably going to be listening to this are going, "You never got off of us." But I think those are things that, as a young coach, I just have a little patience in both yourself as a coach to grow, and as your players, let them work through their mistakes and use failure to learn, not as an end point.
So I pulled one thing out of there that I wanted to address specifically. You talked about how you break down the season and whatnot. How do you go about setting goals for your players? Do you have a specific way that you handle that? Do you set short-term and long-term goals? Or is there any specific methodology that you use for setting goals for each of your players and your team?
You bet. That's an absolutely great question, and I would hope that all coaches are taking, or guys in the game are taking time to set some goals, because if you don't have goals in front of you, I believe you're just not going to get better. But what we would do is we would have our guys, we'd give them a quick little handout that had 6 questions on it, and then we would go from there, where we would build upon our season. The questions would be centered around building the culture of our team, not so much on we want to hold the team to 50 points, or we want to get 10 assists, or we want to out rebound people. I mean, those are things that are built into coaching already. But we put our words down on paper, and we would ask our guys, what would we like our team to stand for, and then follow that up with, what do you want to stand for as a player? And then the next question would be, what do you want our team culture to be? And then what are some things you can guarantee about our team? And we'd have our players go through those questions and what are some things that are for sure about our team, and then what are our shared values. And so we would spend a day working on that, and then I would compile all of that, and we'd put it together, and we'd put it on a poster board, and we'd put it in our locker room, and we'd have our guys look at it every single day, whether they were in practice or whether they were headed to the game. About basically, these are our words. They speak for us, and do we live by them? And so it's kind of, we would give it back to them that this is our team, not my team as a coach, and not my team as a community, but our team as all of those combined.
So then, did that change every year based on that meeting and those conversations that you had with each individual team? I mean, I'm assuming obviously you had some guidance and some input into it, but I would imagine if the players were coming up with some of those things that the program was going to stand for, that, you know, there may have been some ongoing themes year after year after year, but I would guess that at least along the fringes there were some different things that different teams maybe felt were more important than other teams did. Is that kind of what you found?
Oh, definitely. I think that's the crazy dynamic part of building teams, is that every year is different, and that's the part that I love about high school, is that you know, even though we may have a group coming back that are fairly seasoned, we're going to add some new parts to it, from freshmen or sophomores or juniors that move up from a JV or C team, or new kids that maybe moved into our district. But you know, there were some standard things that stuck around, but really what, you know, I guess what I was after is, you know, building the culture of we all stand for one, we're working together, we're gonna enjoy each other on and off the court. We're going to face struggles together as a team. We're going to encourage each other. You know, those types of things. If you can, I truly believe, if you can get your squad to buy into those, then you can sit down and say, okay, we're not going to give up, you know, 10 points or 20 points in the fourth quarter or whatever it may be, or we're not going to get out rebounded in the second half, or we're going to hold a team to 50 points or less, or we're going to have 15 assists or what have you, and get down to those things that are minute. But I think you really have to build on that culture of your group before you can get into the nuts and bolts of really what you're doing.
So day to day, what does that look like? So we're in a practice with Coach Harris, and we're talking about whatever. Let's pick out something that, you know, the team stands for pride, or the team stands for determination, or whatever terminology we want to throw out there. What does that look like day to day when a player is meeting that standard, or the team is meeting that standard, or maybe the team's having a rough day and they're not living up to something that, you know, they said they were going to hold each other accountable for? What does that process look like of building the culture day by day by day? Because we know it doesn't, you know, we can put that on a poster, and we know that if we're not getting the buy-in, as you described, that it doesn't mean a whole lot. So what are you doing day by day with the kids to build that culture?
Oh, that's a great question, because there is so many steps in that process, and it can't be beginning of the season and then forget about it. It's an ongoing deal, and you got to reinforce that with your players day in and day out. If we're building around teamwork, or we're building around being tough defensively or competing, you're just singling out a kid that does that in practice or in a drill, and all of a sudden here's a guy that you know, maybe dives on a loose ball when it really wasn't probably for. All of a sudden you're just giving him, you know, you're over there picking him up, and your teammates or you have your teammates pick him up, and you're high-fiving him, and you're letting him know that, hey, that's the right way to play. Now if they're not doing that, you just reinforce the fact that, okay guys, we put our words, what does that mean when we put our words down on this, and are we going to follow this? Because this is a life lesson for you. This is something that is going to carry you farther than basketball, because if you can't stand by your word, are you going to be successful in life? And I would give an example of, you know, when you're a dad, or when have your first real job, and all of a sudden you call in sick because you just don't feel like going to work. How does that apply to what we're learning here? Well, we're asking you to compete every day, or we're asking you to be part of something bigger than yourself. And so I just think, again, it goes back to that conversation we had earlier in this, is that you've got to be authentic in your conversation with kids.
So did you have teams where it got to the point where eventually the players were sort of policing themselves on the culture? Or did you find that, and then did you have other teams where the players kind of never took the reins and it came more from you? How did that dynamic play out for you?
Well, again, I love loving coaching high school and the public school, because you see that, just like you said, both sides of it. I think for the most part, because I was here for 25 years coaching in this building, and the young kids grew up and they'd hear it at camp. We'd talk about some of our cultural things at our youth camp about when you're in until we tell you you're out. If you're not in, it's pretty simple, because then the decision is that you're out. So I think young people like that, to have that buy-in, but there's some years, definitely, some years you get a group of kids that just don't quite understand it, and yet I really believe those are the ones that come back to you 8 or 10 years later and said, you know what, Coach, you were right. Thanks for pushing us, or thanks for giving us that insight. I didn't realize it till now, but all along, man, you were right on.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to our earlier message. When you're pouring into those kids and you don't always realize that, and they don't always realize that what you're saying is the truth. Same thing, I am sure you could speak about this as a parent. We tell our kids a lot of things, and sometimes they look at us funny and they don't always believe us. But I think eventually I could speak to my relationship with my own parents, that there was a lot of truth to the things that they were saying, even though I may not have realized it in the moment. And I think that players oftentimes are the same way.
Oh, definitely. And I just think those, whether it's a goal or a standard or the values that you have, you've got to be able to put yourself behind those and make it worth what you've written it on, or make it worth getting it out there to them, so that they actually have a belief in what we're doing.
So Lake Chelan is a small school with, you have about 400 or so students, grades 9 through 12?
Yeah, we're not quite that big. If we were that big, we'd be playing up a level. Okay. And we're single A in the state of Washington, so there's 6 classifications. We're third, so there's 2 classifications below us, so we're right in the middle. But we played in 2A up a bit a couple different times. But yeah, we're 350, 320, depends year in and year out. But small school in foothills of the Cascades, beautiful area.
So what are the challenges that you find of coaching at a smaller school where you don't have a huge pool of kids that maybe somebody in a bigger school might have? What are the challenges of that? And then what do you see as the positives? I'm pretty sure I can guess what the positives are, but what did you find to be challenging about maybe being in a smaller school?
Well, I think,
or did you just never think about it because it was just where you were?
Well, part of that, because I grew up here and then moved
Right.
back a number of years ago, and like I said, coached 25 years here. But I think the big challenge was just trying to get kids to know that there was something besides of where we're at, and whether that was giving them an opportunity to play against better competition, or having them experience something that was different than the Lake Chelan Valley. And I think we've done a better job with that, but when I first started coaching, it was pretty easy just to kind of stay around the area and play teams close by and not really kind of get outside our box, so to speak. But I think the best thing, though, is that we've been blessed with some great kids, and I think any coach worth their I guess any coach that has been in it for a long time always loves a challenge. And so we would jump in, and my last several years we would play up a couple levels, and we'd play some schools that were probably quite a bit better than us during the regular season. And I think I took that as a challenge for our program to show where we were at. And when we would go to team camp, we'd play up in the upper level against the 3 and 4A schools, and sometimes that didn't turn out so great because we would get we would just get manhandled physically and that type of thing. But just the idea that you could take on a challenge and that you could I felt like our program stood for itself and that we could compete with a lot of schools that were much bigger than we were.
So when you do that, and I guess I look back on my own high school career and the league that my high school played in at the time, my senior and junior year, we had some good individual players. We actually had a few other players besides myself that went and had an opportunity to play Division I sports, whether it was basketball or football or something else. But I think the perception of the league was that it wasn't extremely strong. And I know I always enjoyed the games that we played in our non-conference schedule, where we would go and play some of the more, basketball tradition-laden schools. And I always enjoyed that and felt like if we had played more of those schools, we'd have been more prepared for our state tournament. And I'm guessing for you as a coach, the opportunity to play against a school with a bigger student population gave you a chance to stretch and push your kids to better prepare. If we go back to your analogy of the paint by numbers picture of the season, by going through and playing up in a summer league and by challenging yourself in your schedule during the season, that come tournament time, your teams were more prepared than they might have been had you stayed at or below the current skill level of your team.
Oh, definitely. There's a little hidden agenda there with that whole thought process, is that let's stretch our limits just a little bit, and that helps us to trust ourselves and to trust others, and under adversity, and when maybe we're playing our 3A or 4A school and they're so much better athletically than we are, but we're still learning to battle. And instead of taking I think it was couple podcasts ago, I'm not sure, anyhow, they were talking about the mental stamina in your guys' podcast.
Right, that was Lindsay Huddleston from Sports Psych Solutions, right, who I met actually at the USA Basketball Coaches Academy here in Cleveland. And
I love that term. I've used it the last 3 or 4 days with my 6th and 7th graders about having some mental stamina during the day, because they've moved to a completely different schedule this year, and how they have to continue to battle through the bell system and doing things different than normally. But when you come to the gym, it's the same thing. And I think those are the great things about sport, is that it allows you to work through a loss or work through failure so you can get better. And you have to be able to accept that failure without blaming other people. And then I'm a firm believer, if you just dig in and fight a little bit, then there's good things that are going to come.
Yeah, one of the themes that I hear coming through loud and clear from you is using the game of basketball, or using your gym, in the case of you being a physical education teacher, to teach more than basketball and to teach more than your subject matter, but to use those things as a vehicle to teach the players that play for you and the students that you have in class life lessons that, again, they're going to use not just when they're 13 years old or 18 years old, but that they're still going to be looking back on the things that they've learned from you 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And that's really where your impact comes in. Talk a little bit about if there was 1 or 2 things that you would want a kid who played for you to come away with, besides how to shoot a jump shot and how to make a left-handed layup. What are the things that, if you could put a finger out there and just say, hey, I want my players to have learned X and Y, what are those things you really want them to learn from you as a coach?
Well, I think probably the greatest thing beyond basketball is that they have a belief in themselves, that the end game is always that I can do it, as opposed to I turned it over, I'm going to drop my head, I'm going to sit down. No, you take that mistake and you turn it into something positive by, at the other end of the floor, you take a charge or you step over. So if they have that belief in themselves, and then again, showing my age a little bit, is that there's value in hard work, and were never kind of a never say die attitude. I think if you would ask guys that I've coached against over the years, is that our kids competed win or loss all the time, and that there was a value in giving that up for each other, that I would give everything I had every minute I was on the floor.
Yeah, what a great lesson. I can't think of a better thing than if a kid could walk away from an interaction with you or with me or with Jason, and if that's what they learned and that's what they came away with, and you could take that attitude into the rest of your life, I think you'd be set up pretty well to have a successful life. I know that's one of the things that, just irrespective of the game of basketball, but with my own kids, is trying to teach them that resiliency and that ability to fight through difficult situations. And I know that, you know, sometimes kids today, and I see it in the classroom, and I'm sure you see it, you know, where you are too, where things get difficult and a lot of kids shut down, and they have that, you know, they have that fixed mindset. They don't have a growth mindset where they think they can get through it and improve and get better. And when I see kids shut down, that's one of the things that, as a teacher or as a coach, I really try to push them through, because we know in our life that we're all going to come across difficult situations, you know, whether it's in our relationships or whether it's in our job or whatever the case may be. We're all going to run into difficulty, and if we have that resiliency to be able to fight through and be able to really, you know, bounce back and get through those hard challenges, then we're all going to be so much better off. So I think that's a great thing that you're sharing with your players, for sure, Joe.
Oh, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate that, because really that's, I've been that way from day one. And, you know, I don't think that's something you learn in a textbook. I just think it's something that, you know, they know that I really care about them, and they know I'm going to be hard on them, but at the same time, they know they can count on me helping them out.
For sure. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about you as a coach and kind of the learning process that you went through when you were coaching, whether it's early in your career, whether it's late in your career. Who were some of the people that you looked up to, or that maybe served as a mentor for you? And what were some of the things that you might have gone to them for in terms of looking for advice or suggestions of things that you could do to make yourself a better coach or a better teacher?
Wow, that's got a lot of depth to that question.
pick out your favorite part of it.
Thanks for putting me on the spot right there, man. You know, honestly, I can think of one of my former football coaches that came and watched me play when I first started coaching, and I thought it was so cool that, you know, I'm a 25-year-old head coach, 26, and here's a former assistant football coach coming up from our hometown watching me play. And afterwards, he just said hello, and I said, well, what did you think? And his answer was, well, do you really want to know? and you know, I guess I was too naive to really say anything different. And I said, well, yeah. And so 30 minutes later, he didn't really critique the coaching aspect of it as far as the X's and O's of the game, but it was just, and it wasn't so much about the demeanor, but he goes, are you making connections? And again, we keep going back to that. Are you making connections with people that you work with as too? Don't forget about them. Don't forget about the custodian, and don't forget about the band director, and don't forget about the secretary. And I, you know, as a young coach, I was so dialed into, okay, practice plan, and I got to get this going, and bus leaves at 4:15. So what am I going to do, you know, with the guys between now and then, and all that stuff. But that made a profound impact on me, that it wasn't just about me and what I thought. It was about the people that surrounded me that I went to work with every day as well. And I think sometimes young coaches, we forget about that. We forget about those people that are around us. And so a year or so later, I talked to him again, and we'd been fortunate enough to win a couple of games and ended up going to the playoffs and off to the state tournament. And the first thing he asked me was, how about those little people? Because that was the reference that he used, was the little people in your life. Are you making a difference for them? And you know, meaning the custodian and the band director and the secretaries at the school. And I said, oh yeah, definitely. And I said, you know, I'm fortunate enough that in a small school everybody knows everybody. So I think that in the bigger sense of, taken away from where you're at and becoming a well-rounded person, that helped me. Um, a couple of my former basketball coach at Eastern Washington University, I mentioned Coach Kraus, and still love running into him today. And he spoke several years ago at a clinic that I put on here in town, and just the X and O part of the game, and just how to teach those X's and O's as opposed to just taking it from paper and putting it on practice and running through it and hopefully it works. He was really about the teaching aspect of it and breaking things down. And I think that probably, I still use things today that he taught me as an undergrad about shooting and footwork and warming up. And again, you just don't see that with the game of basketball today, because there's always something on the internet, or there's always a new offense, or whatever team has won, we're going to copy that 2-3 zone, or we're going to copy that dribble drive offense or whatever. But Coach Kraus was very simplistic, but he broke it down from passing to catching to partner drills, and those are things that I still use to this very day.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because as you know, when you mentioned his name earlier, I actually have a friend who is he's involved in a group that's trying to sort of revamp the way youth sports is done in the United States, and they've based their teachings off of John Wooden, and it's kind of in the developmental stages, and I don't know if they'll ever get it to a stage where it's ready to be rolled out. But he shared with me a book that Jerry Krause wrote, that the title of it escapes me, but I'm sure as I describe it, you'll probably know what I'm talking about.
Beyond the X and O.
It was a book that just basically broke down the skills of the game step by step, of this is how you teach this, and this is how that goes, and and what age group these skills went with, and I read the book, and I've used it to kind of guide me, even though again I've been doing this for a long time, just like you have. I found as I get older, I realize that there's less that I know than when I was younger. I thought I knew a lot more when I was younger, and now I realize I know a lot less than I think I do. So I'm always looking to learn.
That's an experience showing through for both of us, because I feel the same way. It's this, I look back now in my career, and I was like, back when I first started, I thought I had it, and I had a lot, but experience is a great teacher for both the players and the coaches.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's just, again, if I think back to myself as a young coach, and I played Division I basketball, got done, and then eventually went back to school and got a teaching certificate and started out and coached the JV team my first 2 years. And really kind of thought, hey, I know everything that I need to know, and I'm going to be super successful. And and not that I wasn't, but I definitely could have learned a lot more and could have taken my education as a coach probably more seriously than I did. And certainly as I've aged and gotten into different realms of the basketball world, I've realized how little that I know, and how much I need to seek out people that I can learn from, and seek out information that I can use to make myself a better coach, with the ultimate goal of going back to sort of the theme of what we've been talking about all the way through here, is how do you build relationships with kids so that you can use the game as a vehicle to help improve their lives, not just today, but on into the future.
Oh, definitely. I wholeheartedly agree with that comment. That's I think that's the thing that still drives me to this day, to go to clinics and go listen to coaches and jump on something as cool as this, where you're just talking about what you live for, basically. I mean, I've spent more of my life coaching than I haven't, and I still love every minute of it, and what the game has really given me, and what it's given me back, to be able to give back to people.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think all of us that have been in basketball for a number of years, you kind of hear that theme running through. Everybody that we talk to talks about how good the game has been to them, that they've gotten the opportunity to meet so many great people. They've gotten an opportunity to travel to so many cool places. They've got an opportunity to impact so many kids through the game of basketball, that it's really amazing what what a little round orange ball has been able to do for all of our lives. It's incredible.
Oh, definitely. And side note there, I just believe that little orange ball has shrunk the world for a lot of us. It's amazing. Just like you referencing Coach Krause, people who played for somebody or coached with somebody or played against a different program, it really does shrink the world. And what a great avenue or a vehicle to use to make people better people.
For sure. I mean, one of the things that Jason and I have been amazed about here is that, I've told people that I've had this podcast idea on my to-do list probably for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years. And finally in June, we kind of got it up and running. And as a result of that, just in the short time, 3 months that we've had it going, the number of people that we've been able to connect with and talk to, and just people that have been willing to open up like yourself about the game and what it's meant to them. It's incredible. I'm still stunned and flabbergasted that we're able to talk to Coach White from Arkansas, and now we're talking to Coach Harris from Washington, and there's just a laundry list of people that are coming down the pike that we're going to get an opportunity to chat with. And I told Lindsey Huddleston, who you referenced earlier in the podcast, he actually called me today because he wanted to tell me that he had someone who listened to the podcast from Colorado who was coming in town. He's in Detroit, Michigan, coming into Detroit to train with some basketball trainer in Detroit, but then wanted to set up a session with him to go over some of the sports psychology stuff that he talked about on our podcast. And I told Lindsey today, if I didn't have the podcast, I would have gone to the USA Basketball Coaches Academy, and I would have listened to him speak, and I would have still walked away impressed, and I would have still taken the things that he learned, that he shared, and tried to put them to use. But I probably wouldn't have gone up to him and had a conversation with him after it was over, after he was done speaking. But because I had this platform, I went up to him. We had a 5 or 10 minute conversation, and now here we are. I think he and I are, the three of us are developing a friendship, and we're going to continue to work together, and who knows what could happen from it. So it's just, it's amazing what the basketball has done.
Oh yeah, that is just so awesome to be able to connect like that with people. And the game gives us that.
It absolutely does. Now let's talk about, that's a great segue into sort of the final topic we want to touch on, which is, so the game has given us a ton. Talk about how the game has had an impact on you and your family. So your kids have grown up and played for you. You have a son now that's playing in the NBA. So talk a little bit about how you balance the time coaching with your family, first of all, and then we can talk a little bit about how it was to have have your son playing for you and then eventually end up where he has.
Sure. Well, honestly, just feel so humbled to be able to talk about my family and the fact that, because they've been with me every step of the way, and I've got a tremendous wife. She's the best assistant coach I can have, even though we disagree on how many timeouts I had left in the game. But, when I first started coaching, and again, this is a lot of coaches, younger guys today, get in it to coach their kid, and then they get out of it. I coached 20 some years without coaching one of my own children. And when we've got 4 kids, Kaiti's the oldest, lives in Texas. Joe is doing his thing in Brooklyn now, played for Tony Bennett, University of Virginia. My middle daughter, Jaicee, played volleyball at Washington State University, and our youngest daughter, Makenzie, a high school athlete of her own doing. But they were always around the gym, and I think that was kind of a way for them to not only hang out with Dad, but they felt like it was a great place to be, because here's this wide open expanse and they could run around and do what. But just learning by osmosis a little bit, where they would just listen to Dad as coach talk to these players and listen to the huddle before practice, and what a great group of role models we've been fortunate enough to have here in Lake Chelan to have my kids grow up and around, and they've all gone on, and my children have gone on and done great things in their own right. They're 3 college graduates, so we're helping out the national average there with that. And number 4 is on the way. So I was mentioning earlier, we're empty nesters here at home, so it's just Alice and I and the dog, the new puppy. But again, it's just a humbling experience to think that your family grew up around you in a job that I love, and there's not many people that get that opportunity, and I feel very fortunate that they have been by me every step of the way through those tough wins, through the heartbreak losses, through injury or illness with your own family or what have you. And it's I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I think it's made them better people because they've learned how to persevere, and they've learned that work ethic and believing in other people and to trust in other people and to accept some of those failures, all things that we've talked about. That, and more importantly, you never give up on each other, you never give up on yourself, and they learned that stuff. And then I had the fortunate opportunity to coach Joe, which was, I wouldn't turn that around for anything. And now, not to say that we didn't have our ups and downs on the court, as any player that probably played for me would tell you, that I'm very demanding, and coaching Joe was an extreme pleasure. We ended up playing in a state tournament twice with him, and he did some great things as a high school player, the Gatorade Player of the Year, Mr. Basketball in the state of Washington, and I had the best seat in the house watching every minute of that. And then the cool part about it is that we were all in at practice, but we never ever really brought it home. I would never watch film at home. I never forced him to go to the gym with me. It was a kind of again, going back to my deal, it was a love of the game. Joe was a manager for us in the late 90s when we were fortunate enough to win a state championship, and I got a picture of him walking out of the Tacoma Dome holding hands with our 6'10" center that Joe's a 5-year-old, and so there's a little difference in size there. And then I also have a picture of those two gentlemen in San Antonio at the Spurs game when Joe played for the Spurs, because that fella Phil is the assistant GM with the Spurs. So it's gone completely full circle to where Joe had great role models, Jaicee had great role models, Kaiti, our oldest daughter, had great role models, Makenzie. They all were in the gym enough to see, and we had guys over to the house. We'd have team dinners, and Alice would fix just a meal like no other. And the guys still to this day talk about her cookies and stuff. And you just don't get that when you're superficial. And like I said, I use the word authentic, but that's the way it has to be. You're gonna love the guys that are playing for you, but I loved my family more, so I took my family with me to summer league games or with me to the state tournament. And I would ask our guys, would you mind watching Joe while I run to the laundry and wash your guys' uniforms so that we can get ready for tomorrow's game? And they're looking at me, these 18, 19 year or 17, 18-year-olds, kids look at me like, wait a minute, I'm not a babysitter. And then I would tell them, look, how much do I trust you if I'm giving you somebody that I love to watch for an hour while we run to the laundromat or whatever. And then it comes home like, okay, this dude, even though he's been after me a little bit to play a little bit harder or block out a little bit better, he understands that, this is about the bigger picture of it's life. It's a life lesson for us that we're gonna, we're at the state tournament and we're having a great time, but this family of ours includes his family.
So we often come across, Mike and I, like parents that think their kids are going to be like next NBA, like great players in the NBA. When did you think that Joe had a chance to be in the NBA? Like, is there a certain point that you were like, oh, he's got a shot, or did that never really happen until like college came around?
Did he beat me as an 8th grader in one-on-one, or are we just gonna nix that out of this podcast?
No, you just just whenever I just wanted to know, like, when is that point? Where does it reach? Like, and I know
that's just a question. I don't know if I can answer that, because I don't know if we ever thought when he was in high school that he would be that kind of a player. When he got recruited to play at Washington State and at San Diego State and BYU, and then he went to Virginia. He was playing for Tony, and he had a great, I mean, what a great program to be in, so far away from home. And but for him to develop like he has, that's all on him. That dude has got the greatest work ethic of anybody, and I don't know if we really realized that he was, even when he left here from Chelan and went to Virginia, that we knew how good he really was. So I think, it was probably partway through his college career that we're thinking, okay, this guy is pretty good and he's got a chance to play beyond college. And we're thinking, maybe in Europe, or maybe in the long shot, maybe in the NBA. But he's one of those kids that has just, even to this day, he is all about making himself better, and he has put in the time and he's put in the work ethic. And it's not just going to the gym and getting shots up, it's going in and working out. And I've been fortunate to coach some great young players, but he is without a doubt the hardest working dude I've ever been around.
I want to say, when we picked him, because of course we're based out of Cleveland, when we picked him, I was super excited, and then the whole, like, when LeBron was coming back, I thought, oh man, that could really, really work out, like, having him. And I think that the culture change in the Cavs happened 2 years too late to have Joe on our team, because I think that if he would have been on the team in 2017 or 2018, he would have been a perfect fit for the kind of situation that we were playing at that point with the drive, kick, the three-pointer. I really think he would have been a huge asset at that point in our time with LeBron and just how we were playing at that point.
Well, and again, we keep hitting on this, but the game has all these silly twists and turns, and I'm a firm believer in that things happen for a reason. Well, Joe got hurt, he had surgery, he got traded, got released, he didn't have a job, and then all of a sudden he lands at Brooklyn. And you look at how his game has taken off and the things that he's done, and again, that's back on him. He's put that time in to make himself better, and it's just it's looking back, I still grin watching him play, and it's one of those things like, I had a hand in that guy, but more importantly, I said it earlier, I had the best seat in the house watching him play growing up.
So talk about a little bit about because I'm assuming that from the time he started picking up a ball, that for the most part, you were his coach. Am I correct in that, or am I mistaken in that statement?
Yes and no. I never coached him in youth ball. Okay. I coached him in high school. I didn't coach him in middle school basketball. And it was, it was, a great opportunity for him to be around our program and watch what we did and listen to me talk to the old, the high school guys that were playing for us. And he was a manager and a ball boy for longer than he wasn't, and so he was around the game an awful lot, and he just took in every bit of information that was thrown out there. And so when he got into elementary and middle level basketball, he had some great coaches working with him, and he played with his local team and right here in Chelan, and we would travel to different communities and play in some tournaments and this and that. He wasn't on a club team. He didn't have a trainer. When he first got on his elite AAU team, and I hate to use the word elite, right, but Friends of Hoop out of Seattle, great program, great people that ran it, Jim Marsh and Jeremy Agers. When he got on that, the first thing a couple of the guys asked him, well, do you have a strength and conditioning guy, and who's your basketball trainer? And he's right. Oh, he's leaning over there against the wall. It's my dad. Because I had him in class,
right,
teaching strength and conditioning, and I had him in middle level PE, and I was coaching him from the time that he was a freshman. But really, I was coaching him all along when he was a man. manager for us because he was listening to me. We never ever went to the gym after practice when I was coaching the high school squad and he was a manager to work him out or do this. It was like, come on, we got to get going. You got homework to do. You got to get home and get in bed and get your food down. Mom's going to get after us because we ran practice a little late or whatever. So it was not one of those deals where we forced things on him. Again, it was one of those things where, and you watch him play to this day, he loves playing. And he loves playing the game the right way. And I'm hoping that's a testament to what I've been talking about all night, is that, I love the game and I love the guys that have played for me.
I think there's a good lesson for anybody who's listening out there, whether you're a parent or you're a player or you're a coach, that really what ends up making you a great player, and obviously there's a physical set of tools that some players have that other players don't have, but ultimately it's that love of the game that really allows somebody to put in the kind of time that's required in order to have success at the highest level they're capable of. And for some people, their physical tools allow them to top out as a high school player. For other players, they may be able to play on the college level. And for the very, very select few, they do get an opportunity to make it to the NBA. But nobody makes it to the maximum of their potential without having some extreme desire and love of the game of basketball. It just doesn't happen without it.
Oh, definitely. And I think, even Joe's two sisters that played collegiate athletics, they had that, and they had that love for being involved and for that love of competing to make themselves better, not just competing to win.
So now when you sit in the stands or you watch him on TV, what thoughts go through your head? Is it still a little bit surreal, or have you now kind of gotten used to the fact that he's playing in the NBA and having a successful career, or do you still sometimes sit there and go, I can't believe that, coming from where we come from and just obviously knowing his entire story, do you still find it hard to believe?
A little bit of both. It's still surreal when you're down at a local establishment, or you're somewhere and they pull up NBA TV and everybody's going, well, they just said this kid was from Lake Chelan, and you're grinning to yourself like, I'm not going to say a word, but yeah, that's God right there. But you come to realize that this was a dream he had when he was I think when he was about 5, he wrote some quotes on his wall with a Sharpie, and to the disdain of both his mother and I, because we just moved into this house. And one of his goals that he wrote on his wall as well was to become a pro and to never settle and to always prove people wrong. And somewhere he got that. I'm hoping that he got it from a book that I'd given him, or he may be listening to myself, but that makes you feel pretty good about what he's doing. And so you look at him with such an admiration that he's accomplished everything that he's wanted to go out and do, and that you have this sense of pride that yeah, that's our son. But at the same time, he's growing up, he's a young man of his own, he's got his own life, and you're thinking, okay, that guy, I can remember, I was still calling this Joey in our house. It's like you still think about him playing and getting shots up in the front yard with an old basket that we still have and he'll go out there and shoot even to this day, just to make 1 or 2 shots on, okay, I got to get a couple shots on the home court before I head to the gym, type of a deal. So he's never lost that love for what he's doing, and that makes you feel good as a parent. So again, I'm all over the board. I don't know if it's surreal or if it's just this, you're so proud of the fact that he's doing what he still loves to do, but it's just really weird when you sit there and watch him and with the grandparents, and I'm still cheering for him like he's in high school and he's playing against the Warriors, and he checks Draymond Green, and I come up out of my seat like, yeah, did you see that?
That's awesome. That is awesome.
I think the only thing that would make it complete is the Supersonics come back and he gets to play for them before he retires, right?
We've had that just what a great conversation about that, because a guy that he followed when Joe was quite younger played at Oregon, and he was from a small school in the state of Washington, Luke Ridnour, and Luke ended up playing for the Sonics. And Joe patterned his game after him, and the fact that Luke was a small town guy, and he went on and played at Oregon, played in the NBA for quite some time. And we've still got the Luke Ridnour Sonic jersey with the Sonic skyline on it and stuff. So we're hoping one of these days those socks.
It's gonna come back. That thing's coming back. It's got to come back. So let's end with. I want to end with one final question for you, Joe, and that is, if you have any advice for a parent of a kid who shows the sort of potential and love and interest in the game that your son did, is there anything that you think you did well that you would repeat? And is there anything maybe that you would have done differently in terms of how you handled his, I don't know, basketball career is probably the wrong way to say it, but how you handled him growing up in the game? What advice would you give to other parents out there that might be in a situation where their kid's starting to show some ability?
Honestly, I think if you have a son or a daughter that has that skill to be able to, don't push them ahead too quickly. Allow them to fail on their own. And I think that's what we kept telling Joe, is that if you want to be good, you got to work at it, and you've got to be willing to. There's going to be sacrifices, but more importantly, you're going to fail a lot, and you can't just give up on yourself. And I don't know if we do a whole lot differently. My wife wanted to get Joe to a bigger school and to play against better people, and I don't know, I guess I felt like he was fine where he was at, and it's worked out quite nicely. And the way the internet is today and stuff like that, if you're good enough, kind of like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come kind of a deal. If you're good enough, they're going to find you kind of a deal. And so I don't think parents need to push their kids into that upper training model too quickly. If they would just let them work through some of those early struggles instead of trying to and embrace that for them, instead of trying to always straighten the road out for them.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I think we see one of the challenges that at least we see here is people kind of getting into, and again, this is not just related to only basketball, it could be any sport, where kids at 7, 8, 9 are pushed into a situation where they're practicing 3 or 4 days a week, or people are driving 2 hours to play on this team or that team and playing tournaments in multiple states. And I think the story that you've told is that, again, if you're good enough, people are going to find you, and if you work hard enough, you're going to be able to reach your goals, and the grass isn't necessarily greener at the school down the road or the club down the road or whatever. Let the process work itself out. And yet at the same time, I think it's very difficult for parents who haven't gone through some of these situations that we're describing, because you've seen it, I've seen it, and not just with our own kids, but with other people's kids. And you kind of know how the story's going to end, and you wish you could better help people to understand what the process looks like so that they could make good decisions for their kids. And not just good decisions for their kids as basketball players or soccer players or baseball players, but good decisions for their kids as kids and future adults, so that you have the kind of relationship that I'm sure that you have with your kids when they're adults, and now you've put them out into the world and they're having success, and you just continue to build that relationship throughout their entire life. So I commend you for the things that you've done and the things that you've said. It's been a pleasure, Joe, having you on. I don't know if there's any way that you can share with our listeners ways that they can get into contact with you, or if there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to share with our audience.
Well, first of all, just thank to you guys for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to talk about this stuff that I really, truly love doing. And like I said, basketball's been a great game to me, but just being involved in public education and coaching and teaching young people has been a real treasure for me. If I've got some camp guidelines and stuff I've been passing out left and right to folks. So with youth, K through 8 stuff, if folks want to get a hold of me on that, harrisj@chelanschools.org. That's my email. Feel free to shoot me that, and I can get that stuff to you. I don't know, there's going to be a ton of things going through my mind after we get off of here tonight, but just truly enjoyed myself with the opportunity to speak with you guys, and I appreciate what you guys have started, because this is something that I think young coaches and older coaches, us old guys, need to keep the game fresh, and I said it before, keep it simple, and this is a great way to do that. Thank you for what you've got going for Hoop.
Absolutely, Joe. It's been a complete pleasure tonight. You've got an open invitation to come back and talk to us again, and we would love to sit down and continue the conversation, learn a little bit more about all the things that you've been able to do. And again, as Joe's season cranks up, maybe we'll get you on to talk a little bit about the NBA maybe at some point. So
you bet. Oh, I'd love that.
That would be tremendous. It'd be good to get an insider perspective on the NBA. We'd love to kind of pick your brain on that too, and I think our audience would like to hear some of that from a parent's point of view, from the parent of an NBA player. So we just want to say thank you for jumping on with us, and to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.